And I was telling you about what a shock it was when the life expectancy map of the United States came out, because they coded the map in red to blue. So it looks like a voting map. Blue states are blue, red states are red, but it's the map of life expectancy. And these states that overwhelmingly vote for these Republican policies and that ban abortion and that refuse to expand Medicaid and that will not allow for, healthcare, they have the lowest life expectancies in the country.
How are you?
I'm good, honey. How are you?
I'm very good. I am so happy to have you here. It has taken so long for us to finally be in the same place at the same time-ish, even though we're still on Zoom. But you're a very busy lady, and I'm very excited to see you. It's been a while since we've seen each other in person.
It has. It's funny. I have a group, I think, of women like you who I feel so close to, even though when I think about it, I realize I don't see you that often.
Yeah, yeah, we just sort of see each other in passing.
Yeah.
In fact, I think one of the first times I ever met you, I was, oh God, he's going to kill me. But I was driven to come over to you to say hello to you. Because not only was I, obviously, I grew up a huge fan of yours, but also you were the love of my boyfriend's life when he was younger. And he like froze when he saw you, and I had to like take him over to introduce him to you because I was like,
Cutie.
that's what a good girlfriend does. Like you don't,
That's so
yeah,
sweet.
you don't get in the way of that moment. And you were so sweet to both of us and so gracious. And I imagine it must be quite weird being like an entire generation's crush.
I
Uh,
mean, listen, when people are polite about it, it's quite lovely. Also really fun when, I get to meet so many people who identify differently, who have
yeah.
similar loving feelings for my first TV character. So I also really appreciate that she transcends most identity and just seems to be someone people love. It's actually quite flattering for
It's
me.
you're universally hot. That's what that
I was
means.
like,
It's like a
well,
Marvel
okay,
superpower.
I'll take it.
Oh my goodness. So, okay, I want to make the most of your time here today because I feel like you and I are so aligned in so many ways, and I so love and admire the way that you use your platform and have done for such a long time.
Mm,
You and I were both talking on the phone the other day about how a lot of people think that you just started using your voice when it was trendy, but actually if anyone does due diligence and looks into your history of using your platform long before it was cool or even vaguely acceptable for a
mm.
woman to speak out about issues, you've been on that front line, taking the sort of Jane Fonda approach of
Yeah.
trying to make sure that you don't miss the opportunity to help others. We are both actresses, we are both women in the entertainment industry, we're around the same age, we may be up for the same roles, etc. But Me Too, being such a large vocal moment specifically for women of all
Mm,
ages, meant that we could see each other as friends. You and I have both been in scenarios in our early 20s where we've been turned against other women or been told other women are
oh
turning
yeah.
against us. We've both been manipulated around the other women who are around us and made to feel like we should be isolated. And as we get older, we realize that that's a deliberate tool of the patriarchy of not just
Hmm.
this industry, but also society at large. They do this in
Absolutely.
banks, they do this at school, they do this all these different
Hmm.
ways to create hierarchies between women that separate each other, so that we won't talk about our common experiences and so that we
Yes.
won't grow in power because of the strength in numbers.
And the awareness of that lack of logic, when you sort of lift the veil and you go, oh, they want us to be worried about each other, intimidated by each other, to think,
Mm-hmm.
they want me to think that she is out there picking on me so that we don't gang up and take the power from them.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many more of us in these, quote, oppressed classes, whether you're looking at, gender, race, economics, there are so many more of us than there are of the people at the top of the hierarchy of the patriarchy. So they are terrified that we are all going to team up and take the power from them and create a more equitable system. But the idea that our system isn't equitable in the first place is, as you said, completely illogical. Because when you create equity, you actually grow the system. It's not a pie. It's not, oh, well, if your piece gets smaller, Your piece has to get smaller for mine to get larger. No, if you create equity, the actual pie itself gets bigger. There's room for everyone. And that's one of those truths. That's one of those avenues of logic that I think we're so privileged to be able to use our platforms to talk about day in and day out, and bring more and more people into the truth of that reality, because it's not just morally right, it's economically beneficial.
Mm.
When you can in your soul know that something is just, and economists say, yep, and it's really good for the GDP, like, how are we arguing that anything else is an option?
Yeah, 100%. And we now see that, now that we see that women are more united, like I said, outside of this industry, like in the world, I notice a change in the way that women receive one another, because I think we realize how much we've all collectively been through, and that we are not one another's enemy. Obviously, there's always still work to do in that area when it comes to infighting, but the target has now been moved post Me Too, interestingly, onto trans women, where it's
Yeah.
like, right, well, now this is your enemy, this is who to fear, rather than, again, that they're them being the vast minority in our society, they have been now turned into the boogeyman, whereas it used to be other cis women. And it's still taking us away from the fact that there's also a larger system at hand that is oppressing all of us in similar ways, and also oppressing men. But go
I
on.
think we need to be very, very clear about where this target that is on the backs of trans women comes from. Sexism, patriarchy cannot exist without racism. And the people who are the most at risk in the trans community are Black trans women. The anti-trans sentiment is a bedfellow of racism. And when we have seen an entire world awaken in the wake of George Floyd, when you see white suburbanites painting Black Lives Matter on their driveways in graffiti and mounting signs on their homes, the white heteronormative patriarchy needs to find a scapegoat that creates such intense feelings that are illogical, that they have gone after trans folks so hard because they know that the same anti-Black, anti-immigrant sentiment that they've been able to hold on to power through for the last, generations can be drummed up in a fever pitch against trans folks.
Can you make that link between race and gender phobia?
Yeah, so let's be clear that the patriarchy in its top hierarchy is a white heteronormative patriarchy, right? Like, white men in power want to bifurcate the rest of us from each other. White women fall under the illusion that the patriarchy has something for us. It does not. Women, by the age of 22, 1 in 4 women in this country has been sexually assaulted. The largest number of perpetrators of that violence are the largest population of men in this country, which are white men. We fall under sexism as a group of women that is pretty universal, regardless of what men look like. But when we're talking about the top of the pyramid, the highest power structure in our current white heteronormative cisgendered society, it's white men who retain the most power, the most economic power. And white women can be terrible agents of the patriarchy. It's why so many white women voted for Donald Trump. You would rather vote for a man who reminds you of someone who has assaulted you, or your father who is a pig, than you would vote for a white woman who, in this world where women have been encouraged to compete against each other, makes you feel less than. There aren't many of us who have accomplished what Hillary Clinton has accomplished, who have her education, who have been the Secretary of State. So she can be incredibly triggering to that feeling of, I'm not enough if I'm in her company, that women have experienced at the hands of the patriarchy. That's what men have encouraged us to feel around each other, because again, if we team up, we're dangerous to them. So
but also I think I think it's always important to state that, like, just in the name of balance, to prevent anyone then feeling that something hasn't been said, Hillary Clinton has also had demonstrable things about her that people fundamentally disagreed with on political levels. However, at the same time, we do not scrutinize men to that same level. So either we need to level the playing field and scrutinize men to the same level, but we cannot have what Hillary has done versus a predator who's openly bragging about being a predator before he wins the election.
Yes.
And who has a completely openly racist history of redlining, etc.
Yes.
It's this weird thing where we will vote for the woman if she's perfect, and we will apply the boys will be boys thing to the men. They all need to be checked.
Yes. Well, and to your point, if you had taken exactly who she is as a candidate,
yeah,
and put her in a man, he would have won.
Yeah.
And I think it's simply important for us to understand the way that we have inhaled patriarchy for our whole lives, in the same way that our society has inhaled patriarchy and racism and classism for our entire existence. And something that was really transformative to me as we look at this sort of pyramid analysis was reading Gloria Steinem's early work, and her talking about the fact that racism and sexism exist together. They're part of this terrible cycle. And so when we look at a world where the folks at the top have maintained power by othering women and by lying to white women that they're not othered, but they certainly are the victims of every terrible thing that they're doing. And they've othered people based on race and gender, and racism has been institutionalized in this country. When you start to see huge swaths of people who have been looked at as oppressed classes, whether it's women as a whole, whether it's the LGBTQ community, Black folks, brown folks, when all these people stand up and march in the streets and say Black Lives Matter, that scary top of the pyramid that's trying to maintain its power says we need a new enemy. And they've made trans women the enemy. And you can't ignore that in the ways that anti-female sentiment, anti-LGBTQ sentiment, anti-Black sentiment, they are all linked in this anti-trans sentiment, because again, the people who are the most at risk in the trans community, who are as a whole the most at risk among us, within that most at risk community are Black trans women. They are the people in the trans community that are getting killed at the greatest numbers, that are experiencing violence at the greatest numbers, that are experiencing poverty at the greatest numbers. And anyone who thinks that all of this anti-trans sentiment is not also anti-Black is really missing how deeply entrenched and poisonous the patriarchy is in every cavern of our society. But if you are a person who hasn't been blessed with the privilege of exposure to diverse communities, and you have been told by the propaganda that masquerades as a news network that you watch that there is an evil group of people trying to, convert everybody in the country.
By the way, it's left and right-wing media, just to be very clear.
Yeah,
like especially
that's
in the
true.
United Kingdom, like it's now becoming both. But sorry, carry on.
Yeah, oh God, I've just really started to learn about what's going on in your home country's media about this, and I'm horrified.
Yeah. Today, a bunch of my friends who are trans have started making moves to leave by the next election because actual fascism is rising over there, and it's terrifying. But
well, and here too.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your flow. It's just that when we think of a certain news network, I think we think of one, but actually it's there's a growing responsibility on both sides.
There are people profiting off of trying to make people afraid of each other, and I think it is evil and terrible and unbearably cruel, and that there are large groups of people out there telling women, cis women, that trans women are our enemies. Absolutely not.
But also, I think something you were sort of touching on, but I think it's also like a scary place to go, right? Is an approach a mild approach at empathy towards those who have been programmed by manipulative media and mostly by social media. We saw, I think it was called The Social Experiment, right? That huge documentary that showed us that actually our algorithms are entirely different, and we think we're all seeing the same thing. But based on what you click on, even if you were clicking on it because you don't agree with it, you want to watch it, you then get sent algorithmically more things like that, and that's how people can descend into ideologies, either extreme left or extreme right, right? And it's really important because it has led to us thinking we are all reading the same media, we are all receiving the same exposure, and that those who don't understand it from our perspective are just stupid or evil, right? And that's the belief on both sides about each other. And the reason I think it's really important to understand that so much of the hatred is based in ignorance and fear, because they are being fear-mongered. They are being told all these different things are a contagion. They're saying that racial equality is really just a slippery slope into revenge for what's happened to people of color and to minorities for the last many hundred years in the United States of America. There is a terror, there is this feeling of like, they're going to enslave you now because there's this knowledge like we did something so horrible to these people that if we empower them, I think I was talking to someone about it the other day, that if you have, let's say, a dog in a room, right, and you abuse that dog and you keep it in there and you don't give it light and you don't give it proper food and you harm that dog's mental health, you're not going to fucking open the door to that dog because you're worried it's going to attack you. And I think that's what they think is going to happen, whereas all we are asking for is equality. I know I have met almost nobody or read the work of almost nobody who seeks to repeat the patterns in the opposite direction as to the horror that this country has enacted on people.
But what I think is so interesting to your point is that, and this is what I want to get down to the brass tacks on with people, is why do you believe that? And who told you that? You know, again, we just had a paper published this week here in California. The governor ordered a study of what the Black Californians who are descendants of the slave trade are owed in reparations, like what the wealth gap with every generation's mistreatment of Black people in our state. How has that V on the graph grown? What's in the gap? And in 2023, Black people in this state who descended from the slave trade 400 years ago are owed $800 billion. And when you think about that, a lot of people go, well, my family didn't have it easy and it was really terrible for us. And, you know, your family came here through Ellis Island and you know how hard they had it. And people freak out. And it's like, well, just pump the brakes. Imagine where this group of people could have gone over generations, over 400 years, had that money been infused into their communities. And you know that if it had been infused into their communities, it would have been infused into this economy. Imagine who you or me or any of these other people who might be working for the companies that these families could have started. I wish that we could calm down and remember that if something good happens in our community, it also happens for our community. If something good happens to my neighbor, that good happens to me. If something good happens to me, I'd really like to think that it happens to my neighbor. And I wish that we could find a way to be together more outside of, as you said, the echo chambers of these algorithms. I wish that we could not jump to immediate panic about being left behind and think about what can be created when more people are welcomed in. And I know that that might sound like a bit of a utopia, but I really believe that it's the moral truth and the economic truth. It's the social science data. It's, as you said, it's the logic on the other side of the emotion, and it all points in the same direction.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answer, but I
Well,
know
I mean,
you
they
think
don't have
about
the
this
answers
too.
either. They don't have the answers either because like there's no sense in being afraid of immigrants coming in and yet forcing birth. We are forcing human beings that into situations in which people are not financially or emotionally or psychologically or physically ready to raise them. We have a foster care system that is incredibly noble in its intention, but it is falling apart under the pressure. And that's before, those figures were before Roe v. Wade was overturned. And so there's no sense to a lot of these things. And again, I think our current method of, and I know I've been speaking about this a lot lately and everyone's just got to bear with me, but I do feel like this is a drum that needs to be beaten, in that we do need to try to reform the way that we approach those who are already afraid, because the way to handle fear, while I know it's tempting and I have done it before, I've spoken like a total animal to people that I feel so affronted by their beliefs, understandably, but it's very unhelpful when we shame them. And I understand why we want to, and there are some of them we should, because they are bad faith actors who aren't coming from a place of fear. They're coming from a place of upholding their power, or they're upholding their financial gain or increasing their financial gain. Like we know who we're talking about, the pundits, who spread hate for profit. But the vast majority of the people who are voting against us are not people who are going to profit in any way. They're only going to suffer from the marginalization of their neighbors, but they are being terrorized and fear-mongered by their media and by social media and by the kind of the increased indoctrination of fear-mongering of anyone who's different from you. Like, they are terrified, and we have to find out a way to unpick that fear, figure out where it's coming from, and show them that there is nothing to be afraid of, because they're not all inherently evil.
And to your point, I think it can be a really helpful tool when you try to meet someone where they are and welcome them closer to truth, is to remember, as you said, that there are entire echo chambers profiting off of propaganda. This isn't just people who believe one thing because they heard it. They are quite literally being played a tape all day, every day. And
you saw it outside the Trump rally, right? You saw it in New York when Trump was indicted. There were people being interviewed, and the amount of QAnon jargon that was coming out, where sentences that weren't making sense, and again, like, these are people who are older, and these videos are mocking of them. But what I saw was not people that I wanted to make fun of. What I saw was just something deeply terrifying in how emotional they were about these just non-facts that they are spewing as facts, these huge and detailed conspiracy theories that you can almost like feel their elevated cortisol levels. Like, this is coming from they're terrified of all these random conspiratorial takeovers that are coming. And they're so radicalized, and as you say, it's because this has been on repeat all day long. They're on Facebook. They're a generation who's still on Facebook, and it's unbelievable. Like, I created a burner account a few years ago to kind of enter the red pill and see what it is that people are saying. After I saw The Social Experiment, I decided to do that. It's a completely different social landscape.
It's a different universe.
Have you changed tact at all in the last couple of years, do you feel like?
Yeah, I think I've definitely had to learn that getting heated and then publicly being heated doesn't do as well as continually messaging the truth. And it's part of the reason that I try to talk about the moral obligation of inclusivity and building a better society as not just an emotional or moral position, but also a fiscal one. Because people who've been raised to think they're just financial conservatives, I'm using air quotes, just think, well, yeah, you've got this nice flowery moral belief. And I have to say, no, this is what the social science data shows about life expectancy. This is what the economists say about the economy. You have to give people tools to know what the truth is in the language that they have been raised to speak. And, it's why the other day you were mentioning, we were on the phone, and I was telling you about what a shock it was when the life expectancy map of the United States came out, because they coded the map in red to blue. So it looks like a voting map. Blue states are blue, red states are red, but it's the map of life expectancy. And these states that overwhelmingly vote for these Republican policies and that ban abortion and that refuse to expand Medicaid and that will not allow for, healthcare, they have the lowest life expectancies in the country. So the policies that people are being told are, quote, patriotic, that are real American, that they're voting for, are literally killing them.
And is that an increased like gun violence? Is that just
it's gun violence, it's health outcomes, it's all of it. I mean, I'll send you the article so we can put it in the show notes. It's wild to see how all of these things conflate. And there's folks who are anti-choice crusaders out in the world who really believe that stopping abortion will do great things for the American family. And all it does is put families and children into poverty and lower the length of their lives. And this is not an emotional position. This is data. This is fact. And it's very hard to pierce through these issues that have been taken up by political parties to create illogical emotional reactions in people. But something that I find really powerful is that when Roe became the law of the land in 1973, the right had nothing to say about it. It wasn't until 6 years later when they lost, and I can't remember what state it was in, they lost their last legal appeal to stop the integration of schools, that they said, well, we need a new issue. So they decided to go after the unborn, and they actually lobbied among clergy to change the biblical definition of life beginning at first breath to life beginning at conception. That was a political move. They have bastardized religion for politics, which shouldn't matter since the United States is not a theocracy. The entire founding principle of this country is that you get to live as you want and believe what you believe. And you do not fall under the religious law of anybody, and they do not fall under yours. The Constitution is it. And
this is why it's so ridiculous that we have bills that are passing that are saying that it's up to clergy to decide who gets to be married. I mean, they've gone after interracial, interfaith marriage.
It's insane.
Not to mention, of course, anti-LGBTQ plus, so that they're taking away people's ability to join in a union of love.
So when we talk about the rise of fascism here and around the world, when we talk about the rise of Christian nationalism in a Christo-fascist state, we are not being hyperbolic and we are not exaggerating. We are literally witnessing the strangulation of democracy by religious institutions. And it is a wild moment to be in. And when we talk about how serious this is, when we talk about 100-year cycles, when we talk about, an attempted coup in the 20s, the 2020s, and then the 1920s, that then in the 1930s led to an actual genocide, and we say they're using all the playbooks from 1920s Germany to 1930s Germany right now here in our country, and people say, oh, you're being ridiculous. We're not. And it's why I think it's incredibly important, to your point, to figure out how to talk to each other. Because if we don't figure out how to be together outside of these silos of propaganda that are in our faces all day long on our phones and computers, I don't know what's going to happen to us.
Yeah, I'm increasingly terrified, and I also just, no one takes into account what could have happened had the 1920s involved social media and the access and the ability to mobilize.
Well, and the deep fakes and the videos. I mean, I had someone who I really care about say to me, and I could tell by the algorithm, I did a little digging, that because this person is a religious Christian, that they're beginning to get fed some things in their socials that are not based in reality.
You're talking about the drag brunches, the insane AI deep fakes of drag brunches showing like a man in a, showing a person in a thong. I'm not sure of their gender.
With the exposed silicone and the exposed genitals and the whole thing, and the
dancing around babies and children.
And it's not real, and it's propaganda made to demonize a group of people, and all the conversations I had about the propaganda and how could this get into your head and all the things. You know what finally clicked for this friend of mine? I said, let's look at drag. Let's look at the iconography of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, to the birdcage. Let me remind you of my lovely, not blood uncle, but my family uncle Jeff, whose husband Winston did drag as Diana Ross every Saturday night, through all of the 80s and 90s, and is so fabulous. I said, have you ever seen a fabulous drag queen? Not in full, perfect, laid lace front, incredible makeup. Nothing is exposed. Nothing is shown. What drag queen have you ever seen who would let you know what's how it's all made? The whole point is that it's a perfect, gorgeous costume camp fantasy. And it clicked for this person, like, oh.
Did you see that viral video that's gone around in the last month of that comedian saying, like, of course drag queens aren't abusing children. If they did, those children would be covered in glitter. He was like, you know what we need to do? He was like, it would be the shortest episode of SVU ever. Like, here's where it is. Here's all the glitter. There she is. She did it. And he said, like, you want to protect children? He was like, cover the priests in glitter.
Yes. Honestly, genius. You know what I've started doing is every time I see an article about, a bust of the trafficking of children in Texas by clergy members and school principals, and all around the country, this stuff is happening. Every time I see an article on Twitter, I just retweet it and I say, still not a drag queen, over and over and over and over and over again, because I'm trying to prove a point.
Dude,
that
the headmaster of my primary school was like a leader in a paedophile gang.
no.
He used to let like Gary Glitter come to our school and pick out. And I went to school for vulnerable children where a lot of the children were special needs. I had trouble with my hearing. I had trouble with my joints. Like there were lots of children who had cerebral palsy, like a lot of children with severe ADHD, like a lot of vulnerable kids with not enough carers per kid. And when he was caught, they found thousands of hours of videos of our students, vulnerable disabled children, in videos that he'd taken, because he was just like charming, kind of tall, well-to-do, kind seeming, upstanding member of our society that no one suspected, and he was a demon.
Wow, I'm so sorry.
It's really wild. But this is, we're looking at supervised drag brunches and never looking at the unsupervised places where we've been told our children are safe, and that's always where the damage happens.
Well, and by the way, one of the things is they keep pointing, right, the evangelical right and the far right in American politics points at, again, the most vulnerable, our LGBTQ communities, trans women. And they say, this is the problem, rather than these are the people who need the most protection from people like us. The people who are screaming that it's drag queens that are the problem, 13 of the states trying to outlaw drag brunches right now in America still have legal child marriage. Tennessee just defeated a bill to ban child marriage. The GOP in Tennessee went and fought against making marrying children illegal. This happened this year in 2023. So we're being bait and switched. Our society is not paying attention to the right thing, and we're not paying attention to the people who are doing real evil among us. And all I know how to do, to your point, in this moment is to keep beating the drum. So I just try to repeat it.
Yeah, and keep pointing out the contradictions.
Yes.
Keep pointing out the contradictions, like we don't want to allow children to go anywhere near gender affirming care, otherwise their parents or the doctor can be imprisoned and they can be taken away from their parents. But at the same time, we have no problem if a 9-year-old is molested by her dad and she becomes pregnant, she will have to carry that baby to term, which will probably and could very much likely kill her, or at least derail and destroy her life. So again, it's just like, it doesn't add up. Like the fear of, the fear for children around, gender or whatever, but then we have everything to do with, or even like sex education or reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and yet we still have the guns and the ARs specifically. Like, I think if you just keep challenging people calmly with contradictions and asking them why, often they unravel. But instead, and I'm not having a go at us, but I think by pointing in their face and telling them that they're just stupid or evil, then we don't force them to critically think about the answers as to why they're okay with one and not the other. Why are we worried about trans women in prisons with cis women, but we're not worried about male police wardens who are responsible for pregnancies in women's jails, who are responsible for an unbearable amount of sexual abuse, and probation officers who are able to abuse the women that they oversee with impunity, because if the woman rejects that man in any way, and they are predominantly male, we need to do something about that, then they can be sent back to prison, because that person can report that they've broken their probation. So it just doesn't make sense, and it wasn't making sense to me. And Matt Bernstein, who's a fucking wonderful online social justice speaker, was saying to me recently that it's because people are afraid of the society we live in, and the oppressive system, or the danger, is so ginormous, it's almost like a big intangible mist. And so for our own sanity, sometimes people seek out the boogeyman. They seek out, well, I'm going to project all my issues onto you, because if I can tangibly destroy you, I have some feeling of control or an autonomy, and then I feel like I'm protecting myself in some way, because it's too much, too unfathomable to take on the system of male wardens or patriarchy. So we just go after this less than 1%.
I really do think in the ways we get it wrong, I think we aren't looking into those other silos enough. We are thinking everyone that we're clearly messaging to gets the same facts in their, in their phones all day long as we do. And that's just not the case. So
Yeah.
we've got to get smarter about,
Well, we're not
okay, all
allowed to
these
look into the
people that are in-
silos. We're not allowed to even converse
Yeah.
with those people as we're considered embracing it or platforming. Like, we're calling to cut it on both sides, politically calling to cut people off who have different political opinions. Like, none of this is going to work. We have to be in the trenches together, because we have a way bigger enemy when united. If we really look at things, the people who benefit from all of us turning on each other are not giving any of us, regardless of our political ideology or political feelings, the healthcare that we need, the support that we need, the social support, the wage gap versus the mortgage gap, like all these crazy things are happening. Food being poisoned, big sugar dominating the United States of America. Like, all these
it's broken
things.
for all of us.
Yeah, big pharma, like everything is a nightmare. And we're all just sitting there like picking at each other. But I agree with you about the hopefulness. And I think that's partially why I wanted to talk to you, is that we can unpack this stuff, but also discuss the fact that we have living countries that exist right now, places like New Zealand or places like certain parts of Europe. Obviously, fascism is rising, and oh God, too many European countries. But we have seen what happens when we create equalities, we create tolerance. Like, and it's not a utopia. Like, we've seen what happens when they take away assault rifles, that mass shootings go down. Like,
we did it here. We had the assault weapons ban, and when it lapsed, it wasn't voted back in because politicians were taking money from the NRA.
Yeah,
it's marketing, and the fact that we allow marketing money to matter more than our kids is insane. But I feel really bolstered when we look at other places that are coming up with incredible solutions. When we look at, as you said, great examples from New Zealand, from Finland, even Copenhagen and the water project that they did years ago. There is so much inspiring work happening around the world. And when you look at, the happiest countries on earth, you go, we could do that. We could make a couple of changes and we could do that. And by the way, we would all flourish. It's just about figuring out how to get underneath these blankets of messaging that encourage infighting rather than community success.
For sure. And also, like, for anyone who kind of feels hopeless, I'm sure that Berlin is not a perfect place. I only spent like 3 months there last year. But given where Berlin has come from, right, and they have reminders of it all over the entire city. You can't swing a cat for a reminder of what they did that was incredibly fucked up. But the place has turned into somewhere that is so gay and trans friendly and sex friendly. Like, they don't demonize sex. It doesn't feel like a theocracy over there. Neighbors help one another. Women walk safer through the streets. I've spoken about it once in this podcast before, but I remember being stunned by seeing this gorgeous woman eating pizza alone at 11 p.m. at night outside a pizzeria. And she had her headphones on already. Like, woman with headphones on at 11 p.m. at night. Beautiful woman, young woman alone, headphones on. And she doesn't even look nervous. You can tell that those cortisol levels are on the floor. She's just sitting there. She's listening to like a podcast. She's staring into space. She's not like gripping her handbag or looking around her. And she's got every right to, because she's not being bothered by a single man. They are just coming and going and leaving her to it. And I was like, how sad that I am so stunned by this. Like, how sad that I could go for a 9 p.m. walk and I feel pretty fucking safe, and I get home without having even been fucking looked at twice by a man. I was like, what? And that's just we're just talking about one particular type of safety, but again, the tolerance and the growing racial diversity there. I was like, this is a fucking social experiment that you can come from the fucking brink of complete madness and pull it back to become somewhere that everyone feels like a part of something really good, and the people come together in such a stunning way.
And isn't it interesting to acknowledge that the only way that it's possible is by telling the truth about where you've been and who you've been?
Honestly.
You've got to. And these people who want us to erase our history here, it's unfathomable to me. It happened. It's not up for debate. Everything that this country has done happened. Imagine if we could just agree to let the truth be the truth and then move on to make it better. The amount of energy that is wasted by humanity, by the fighting over what we're going to acknowledge and what we're not. Let's just acknowledge who we've been and how we became this way, and then work on community solutions. But again, the community solutions are the threat to the top of the patriarchy pyramid. So they want us fighting about, what books our kids should be reading in school. I will never forget listening to one of those school board meetings, and this mom was like, my son came home from a lesson about the Holocaust and was just destroyed. And I was like, lady, that's a sign that you're doing a good job. You're not raising a sociopath. Imagine if your teenage boy came home and was like, yeah, genocide. Wow, that was a cool history lesson, mom. You would have a problem. Like, you're supposed to be mortified by the worst things that humanity has ever done so that you can be a person who would never allow it to happen again.
And we can all be reassured in what little shits we were once, and how much we have changed, and how much reform we've seen in other human beings, maybe in our families or anything, maybe within our families or our social circles. Like, we know that human reform is so possible only if you are willing to not gaslight people about the past and move through it and move on. And I think that as long as we can also, as a culture, as a social culture, embrace change and not always tie people to all the mistakes they made before, then we can further motivate people. If we don't motivate people by saying, okay, you know what, I actually see the work you're doing, I see your growth, I'm going to stop treating you as the exact person you were before, then I think we also have a better chance of that. I think growing in our tolerance, understanding of each other, and our hope, like, we're becoming hopeless, and it's so vitally important that we don't lose that right now. We need it more than ever. And I think you have that hope and I have that hope. And even though it seems like we're probably shouting all the time, we're shouting because we have hope, because we believe in change. That's what activism and advocacy is a fundamental belief in change, therefore a move towards it. And so how would you encourage young people out there who are listening to this, who identify with you in some way? What are some things that you would encourage them to do if they're feeling, because a lot of people aren't at the beginning of their journeys, let's be real, post 2020 a lot of people jumped in, and then a lot of people got very afraid, and then some people got burnt out because they were supposed to then be across perfectly every issue. I know you faced that as a public figure.
God forbid you miss one news story and then everyone tells you you're a nightmare and you don't believe in anything you say you believe in. You're like, I was just sick yesterday, I'm sorry. Exactly. I just literally needed to take a nap. I didn't see it. But what's going on?
We have a growth in, like, fatigue and intimidation. And how do we oversee that, and, like, how do we override that in ourselves, and how would you hope that they can override it?
Listen, I think you've got to be kind to yourself. I also think we've all got to light this idea of perfect on fire. It's so toxic. I think what I have found matters to me is I'm trying to just go for a walk in my neighborhood for 20 minutes every morning, to give myself 20 minutes of just fresh air and self-care. It's actually really hard for me. And then to say, give yourself another 20 minutes where you dig into what's going on around you. So if that means, creating a list of people that you follow who you trust for their opinions, that might be us at I Am a Voter, encouraging young people to get out and vote and change their futures. It might be following the NRDC. It might be following, someone like Brittany Packnett Cunningham, who's going to let you know exactly what's going on in her community, and, is on the news all the time, being an incredible voice of reason. There's so many wonderful human beings. It's people that you're cultivating. It's me really trying to use my platform as my own version of a news outlet and make sure that every day in my stories, things that are important are getting eyeballs. Do what you can and follow people you trust. And to your point, if someone that you know or care about says something that doesn't quite track, if you can tell they're getting one of those scary silos infiltrating their space, maybe just say, where did you hear that? What made you believe that? Can I send you something about this that I happen to know about? It doesn't have to be a full on, 12-hour a day job that you add on to your job, but it can really be, it can be something that with a little bit of nurture every day, you feel more informed, you feel more equipped, the people around you feel loved. That would be my encouragement, is be gentle with yourself, take breaks when you need to. And in the ways you want to love your community, try to make sure you're loving yourself, even if it's just 20 minutes a day.
My roommates and I have created now like an information curfew of just between like 5 and 7 is when we look at politics and can talk to each other about politics. And it's
I
like
love that.
so it just like, I finished my day at 5. It's not the first thing I see in the morning, because then I just set off with like stress and terror about the state of the world. And so I get my work done. I have my time with my dogs or with my boyfriend and with my friends. And then at 5 p.m. to 7 p.m, it is fucking go time. I'm going to go and fucking look into everything. I'm even going to look at the things that are opposing my very rights to see what people are thinking and why and who's telling them these things. And I'm going to, but I'm careful with it because I don't want to like increase the algorithm in their favor too much.
Right.
But those, giving myself anyway, worked for me. A boundary as to how often I'm allowed to take in information that's literally creating a dysfunction in my hormones because of how stressed I've been.
Yeah, the cortisol and everything.
Yeah, how much that's impacted my estrogen, etc. Like I've seen like a physical severe impact on my sleep and on my hormones and on my period and everything, partially from my environment. So that can also be food that I eat, etc., but also massively feeling like I have to be informed 24 hours of the day, and I have to be a first responder publicly when I don't have all of the data, and then I fuck up my communication. Or I platform the wrong person by mistake. And so it has given me a calmer way, and I highly suggest those hours. It's before you eat, it's away from dinner time, another time that it's important for you to feel rested and calm so you get your nutrients.
I love that 5
and
to
far
7.
away from sleep. So but we don't, because we get into large, long political conversations otherwise in my household. So, and we don't get anything done. So now that's just an option for some people that I've started adopting, and maybe you can take that on as well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think I've really tried to make sure it's not my first thing in the morning. I don't know that I could wait till 5, but I do think maybe splitting the window and giving myself a morning and an afternoon time might be a nice experiment for me.
You need that hit of that news.
I just don't think I could wait all day. I know things are happening. But I have definitely, something that we instituted in our house, which has made a big difference, is we have alarm clocks on each side of our bed.
So
we do not
phones.
There are no screens in our bedroom whatsoever. No phones in the bedroom. There's no wake up and open the phone when you turn off the alarm and start scrolling. It's a non-starter.
And there I was thinking you were both listening to my podcast 24 hours a day. On your phone.
Just laying in bed,
fucking traitor,
scrolling, listening,
following my Instagram and my Twitter. I'm hugely disappointed, and this is a really sour note to end this on.
Broken Hearts Club over here.
I think it's great. I think you're great. This is not the chat that we intended to have. We had a whole mental health
thing we were
going to talk about. You're going to have to come back another time.
Okay.
But the thing is that you just speak so beautifully about things in a way that is so uninflammatory and fact-based and science-based. And right now we don't have enough people who have big platforms who are coming from a place of kindness rather than condescension. And you are still firm in everything that you fight for. You are unforgiving in the ways that feel incredibly careful and important, and you're a very considered person, and it's very hard to maintain being considered when these things are directly emotionally impacting you. You and I feel very, very emotional about abortion rights being taken away, about our friends, our neighbors being impacted, having their rights taken away, rights that we are still able to retain. This is emotional labor, and not just emotional labor. This is emotional. It's an emotional situation. It's very hard to keep your cool. And I feel like you've done a lot of personal mental health work on yourself.
Yeah, to be able to figure out where to put the very real grief and the very real rage and the frustration and the stress, and to give it its own space, so that it's not the reactionary thing that I immediately carry into every space with me has taken a long time. But
How do you do that, by the way?
I don't even know how to explain it. It's a practice. It's really something that I've had to learn. You know, I signed up for my first political campaign in 2007, and I was working on environmental campaigns before that. I've just been doing this for a really long time. And sometimes I vent about how mad I am. Sometimes I draft tweets that are vicious and then I don't send them. I draft them and then I save draft and then I calm down, you know, and that'll probably come as a surprise to the people who think I'm a real asshole on the internet. But it takes work. But yes, you know, my goal is to try to bring as many of us together as possible. And sometimes I literally go, is this going to welcome anyone in, or is this only going to talk to people who think the way I do already? I ask myself those questions every day. And I also realize that part of my calling and part of my skill set is this work. And everyone has different skill sets. Some people don't want to speak in public, but they're incredible artists who can, you know, design the whole look of a campaign or you know, come up with a rallying cry. That's not my spiritual gift. I can't even draw a stick figure. Like, beginning to learn that we all have gifts to offer. And again, I think if we gather in community and then figure out how as a collective we can affect better change, everyone can have a seat at the table, everyone can participate. Those are all the things I think I've learned over the years.
And people have the capacity of change. We can't lose that optimism. Now, of all times, just to say it one last time, optimists are going to be at the heart and the forefront of saving our culture.
Yeah.
And saving it for everyone.
Yeah.
People who think they're going to be threatened by measures we take to create a more equal and sustainable world, they will also benefit. They have no idea yet how harmed they're going to be by the practices of their lawmakers, because they're being so consistently lied to. And for them and us, I want us to believe that we can do it, because we can. They did it. Go to Berlin, you'll see.
We're gonna do it.
It honestly, Berlin changed everything for me.
Yeah.
It changed my approach. It changed my belief. It reinvigorated me, and it remains now in my mind constantly as to what we can be so easily, because we're a powerful place.
When someone shows you another path forward and you realize how good it can be, you know, we have more options. You know, there's suddenly another door we can walk through, and I think it's thrilling.
Great. Well, I have loved sitting down with you. Please come back again so we can have a mental health conversation. You're a fucking gem, and I so appreciate you. And I'll text you between my 5 and 7 hour window so we can vent.
Please. Oh my God, great.
Politics.
We can vent together.
Before you go, I just want to ask you, what do you weigh?
I weigh community, dedication, curiosity, love, and showing up.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, my dear.